When we hear the word cryonics, the mind paints images of capsules, clouds of cold vapor, and a silent hall where time itself seems to slow its breathing. But cryonics is not a scene from science fiction. It is a real practice in which a human body, after legal death, is cooled to ultra-low temperatures in order to preserve its structure for decades, perhaps centuries. Why would someone choose this path? For some, it's giving science a chance to catch up with an illness that claimed life too soon. For others, it's about replacing the final full stop with a comma, a hope that one day doctors will be able to restore what today cannot be healed. And for a few, it's a philosophical protest against finality itself, an attempt to extend the conversation with life for just one more line. The idea did not appear overnight. In the mid-20th century, scientists began systematically studying the effects of low temperatures on cells and tissues, searching for ways to protect them from damage during freezing and thawing. This led to the creation of cryoprotectants, substances that reduce ice formation and prevent mechanical destruction. Over time, an entire infrastructure emerged around these studies: organizations, storage facilities, protocols, and legal frameworks. It was a fusion of biology, engineering, and ethics, and it raised questions that no single word can answer. Yet, at the heart of our conversation is not only technology or medicine, but the human being. Their sense of self, memory, bonds with loved ones, and what many call the soul. If the body is placed into a frozen sleep, what happens to the soul in that moment and after? Does it remain nearby, like a watchman at the door? Does it travel to other realms and complete its journey? Could it choose to wait? Should the body be revived one day? We won't rush to conclusions. Ahead lies an exploration of different spiritual traditions, comparisons with near-death experiences, reflections on the nature of consciousness, and how cryonics reshapes the familiar boundary between life and death. This introduction is an invitation to a calm inquiry. I suggest we treat cryonics not as a final answer, but as a question that opens an inner dialogue. We will travel from the soul's spiritual connection to the body, to the scientific principles of cold preservation, examine possible scenarios for the soul's existence during cryonic suspension, and consider what this might mean for karma, memory, and personal history. And in the end, we will return to the most important point: the deeply personal choice each person makes, guided by conscience, faith, and their understanding of life's meaning. Across cultures and traditions, the connection between the soul and the body is described in many ways. Yet the essence of these descriptions is strikingly similar. A human being is seen not only as a physical organism, but as a union of matter and an immaterial essence. Eastern philosophies speak of the combination of the dense physical body, subtle energy bodies, and a divine spark. In Christian tradition, the soul is said to give life to the body, and after death it continues its existence in another realm. In Hinduism and Buddhism, the soul is viewed as a traveler, temporarily dwelling in a physical vessel to undergo a specific life experience. In esoteric literature, there is the concept of the silver cord, a fine energetic thread that links the physical body with the soul and carries the flow of life energy. As long as this connection remains, a person is considered alive, even if consciousness is temporarily absent, for example, in deep sleep, in a coma, or during brief clinical death. The severing of this cord signifies the soul's final departure and the impossibility of returning to the former life. Spiritual teachings often describe the moment of death not as a single instant, but as a process. Some accounts say the soul leaves immediately after the heart stops. Others suggest it lingers for a time, observing events, and sometimes even trying to make contact with loved ones. In certain teachings, the soul departs only when it fully realizes that the earthly journey has ended. Interestingly, Many spiritual systems emphasize the role of the soul's own will. Sometimes it may remain nearby longer than expected, if there are unresolved matters or deep emotional attachments. At other times, it departs quickly, as if it had been preparing for the transition all along. Understanding this subtle connection is crucial for our discussion, because cryonics presents a unique question. If the body has not decayed, its structures are intact, yet all vital processes have stopped, what happens to this energetic thread? Does it break as in ordinary death, or does it remain dormant in some suspended state? We will begin searching for the answer by first exploring what happens during natural death. In our perception, death is often imagined as a sharp boundary, a line after which everything stops. But both science and spiritual traditions tend to describe it not as a single instant, but as a process unfolding in several stages. Physiologically, death begins with the cessation of the heart and the stopping of breath. Blood no longer circulates, and tissues and organs quickly experience severe oxygen deprivation. This state is known as clinical death. It can last from a few seconds to several minutes, and under certain conditions, a person can still be brought back, for example, through resuscitation efforts. During this time, many people who have experienced clinical death report vivid visions, sensations of leaving the body, encounters with light, or meetings with loved ones who have passed before them. If no help is given, or it comes too late, biological death follows. This is the stage where vital processes cease irreversibly. Brain cells begin to break down, and organs lose their ability to recover. From a medical standpoint, life is over at this point. Spiritual teachings add another, invisible layer to this physical description. It is believed that right after the body stops, the soul may remain nearby for a while, as if watching over its former home. In some traditions, it is said that the soul fully detaches from the material world after 3 days. In others, the transition is described as instantaneous. Esoteric sources often portray this process as the gradual disconnection of the subtle bodies, one after another. First, the link to the physical body is severed. Then the emotional layer dissolves, followed by the mental layer. Only after these steps does the soul fully enter what can be called the afterlife, or the subtle realms. In this sense, clinical death is a unique state. Here, the connection between the soul and body is not yet broken. The silver cord remains intact, and therefore, with successful resuscitation, the soul can return. This offers us a valuable analogy when thinking about cryonics, because in cryonics the body is also held in a kind of in-between state, though under entirely different conditions. By understanding how the natural process of dying unfolds, we can better compare it to what happens when a body is frozen. And that is exactly where our journey will take us next. Cryonics is a technology in which the body of a person, after legal death, is cooled to ultra-low temperatures to halt all biochemical activity and preserve its structures as completely as possible. The core idea is that in the future, when medicine and science reach far greater heights, this body might be repaired and brought back to life. From a scientific standpoint, the process begins immediately after death is declared. To minimize damage, the body is cooled rapidly, and the blood is replaced with a special cryoprotectant, a liquid that prevents the formation of ice crystals. Ordinary freezing destroys cells, but a cryoprotectant allows the water inside them to solidify in a glass-like state, greatly reducing mechanical damage. The body is then placed in a cryostat filled with liquid nitrogen, where the temperature remains around minus 196 degrees Celsius. In today's medical terms, at this point, the person is dead. The heart is still, there is no breathing, and the brain shows no activity. Yet cryonics advocates argue that this state could be viewed as a deep suspension of vital processes, rather than an absolute end. And here we encounter a profound philosophical question. If life is paused but not completely destroyed, can we say that the soul has left? Or could it be waiting in a dormant state? Skeptics claim that a frozen body is simply an empty physical shell with no link to consciousness. Esoteric perspectives often say it all depends on when the silver cord was severed. If it broke before freezing, the soul has already departed. If not, it could, at least in theory, remain connected to the body, though inactive, as if in a deep slumber. There is also the legal and ethical dimension to consider. Under the laws of most countries, a cryonically preserved person is considered dead. But if, one day, such individuals could actually be revived, it would overturn our very definition of death as we know it. This is what makes cryonics unique. It stands at the boundary between life and death, creating a new intermediate state that remains only partially understood by both science and spiritual traditions. When we try to imagine what happens to the soul at the moment a body is frozen, we must rely on indirect analogies and spiritual speculation. There is no direct proof, only the accounts of people who have undergone near death or other borderline states, and the reflections of esoteric thinkers. Let's look at several of the most often discussed scenarios. Scenario 1. The soul leaves the body, as in ordinary death, and never returns. From the perspective of most religious traditions, death is the moment when the soul departs from the physical vessel and moves into another realm. If, at the time of freezing, medical death has already occurred, the connection between the body and soul may have been severed, and preserving the physical form would not change that. In this case, an attempt at revival might awaken the body, but not the original person. Instead, it could be inhabited by a different soul, or perhaps by an artificially reconstructed consciousness based on stored memories, if future technology makes that possible. Scenario 2. The soul remains nearby, waiting. Some spiritual concepts suggest that a soul can linger near its body, especially if the body remains intact and preserved. In this scenario, the frozen body becomes like a locked house, and the soul is the resident who has stepped outside but has not moved away entirely. It may stay close, aware of the body's frozen state, yet free from the sensations of pain or the passage of time as we know them in the physical world. Scenario 3. The soul enters a special state of sleep or pause. This idea leans more toward esotericism than religion. Here, it is believed that the soul might sleep alongside the body, remaining in a dormant state until biological activity resumes. It's similar to the way time in dreams feels suspended. When you awaken, it seems as though only a moment has passed. To even begin to picture these scenarios, it's useful to recall the experiences of people who have been in prolonged clinical death. Many report that time seemed to vanish or flowed in strange ways, sometimes instantly, sometimes stretched out. Some describe a feeling of peaceful observation, while others speak of traveling to vivid, otherworldly realms. These stories offer only a hint of what the soul might experience when the body is effectively stopped. But it's important to understand that cryonics is not clinical death in the pure sense. Here, the body is fully and deeply frozen, with biochemical activity reduced almost to zero. This is why many esoteric thinkers view cryonics as something unique, a state in which the soul might exist literally between worlds, belonging fully neither to life nor to death. In the esoteric worldview, cryonics is seen not only as a technical experiment, but also as an intervention in the natural cycle of the soul. Many spiritual teachers believe that a soul enters the physical body to undergo a specific experience, and that the moment of departure is an essential part of this journey. Freezing the body, in their view, may create an unusual state in which the soul finds itself suspended in a kind of in-between reality. Some esoteric thinkers speak of the phenomenon of earthbound souls. This term is usually used to describe cases where a person dies suddenly and is unaware of their death. In such situations, the soul may remain close to the material world for a time, without crossing into other realms. In cryonics, they suggest a similar effect could be artificially created. The body is intact, but not alive in the usual sense, and the soul receives no clear signal to make its final transition. There are other interpretations as well. Certain spiritual traditions claim that the soul can choose whether to remain near the body or move on to higher planes. In this view, freezing does not prevent the soul from continuing its journey, but it leaves open the possibility of returning if the body is restored. This idea aligns with the belief in the soul's free will and its right to chart its own path. There are also rare accounts from mediums and individuals who claim to have contacted the souls of cryonically preserved people. These stories often describe a state of calm, free from fear or emotion, but tinged with uncertainty, as if the soul were waiting for a train without knowing if it would ever arrive. Such accounts sometimes evoke imagery of long corridors, silent halls, and an endless winter. Interestingly, esoteric practitioners often emphasize the influence of vibration and the surrounding energy field on a frozen body. In their view, the place of storage, the attitude of those who care for it, whether loving attention or indifference, can affect the energetic state of the person, even if the body lies in deep cold. None of these perspectives have scientific confirmation, yet they reveal something important. For spiritual consciousness, cryonics is not just a technology, it is an intervention in subtle processes. And this means that the question of the soul in such a state requires not only medical insight, but also philosophical and ethical reflection. If we view cryonics not only as a scientific experiment, but also as a phenomenon that touches the deepest layers of human existence, we inevitably enter the realm of psychology and karma. From a psychological standpoint, the very act of signing an agreement for cryonic preservation during one's lifetime already shapes a person's perception of death. For some, it offers a sense of control and hope. For others, it hides an unspoken fear, a way of postponing the acceptance of the inevitable. Some suggest that such a choice can become a form of avoidance, an unwillingness to end the earthly journey and step into what lies beyond. The karmic aspect is more complex and profound. In most spiritual teachings, earthly life is seen as a lesson or a series of challenges the soul must complete. Death is part of this cycle, a kind of final exam, after which a new stage begins. Cryonics, however, artificially inserts a pause between these stages. This could potentially influence karmic development, especially if the soul remains bound to the body without moving on to higher realms. One hypothesis suggests that a long period in a frozen state could disrupt the natural rhythm of reincarnation. A soul that has not completed the lessons of its current life may be delayed, thus postponing the experiences awaiting it in its next incarnation. This can be compared to a student who, failing to take an exam, decides to take a long academic break, but in doing so, misses the opportunity to continue learning. At the same time, there is an opposite view, that the soul is free to choose and can complete its karmic tasks regardless of the body's state. In this case, cryonics does not interfere with its path, but simply provides an additional option for return if it is deemed necessary and beneficial. The ethical question is equally important. If the soul truly returns to a revived body after decades or even centuries, will it be able to adapt to a new era, new conditions, and perhaps even a new mission? After all, the world will have changed, and with it, the challenges that must be faced. Let us imagine that, many years from now, technology truly makes it possible to bring a cryonically preserved person back to life. Their body would be restored, the heart would beat again, breath would return, and the brain would awaken. But would the same soul that once lived in that body return with it? From the perspective of spiritual traditions, this depends on whether the connection between the soul and the body, the so-called silver cord, was preserved throughout the entire period of preservation. If that cord was severed immediately after death, the soul would have moved on, perhaps even reincarnated, leaving the body as an empty shell. In that case, there is a possibility that another soul might enter it, one that finds this vessel suitable for its own purposes. In esoteric thought, this phenomenon is sometimes called an incarnation transfer, or walk-in. If, however, the connection somehow endured, and the soul chose to wait for the awakening, then a return to the former personality might be possible. Yet even in this case, profound changes could occur. A long interruption in biological activity, complete disconnection from the physical world, and the vast gap in time could alter perception, character, and even core values. It might be the same person in memory and biography, but inwardly, something would have shifted. Memory itself raises a crucial question. If the brain and neural structures are perfectly restored, memories and skills could be preserved. But if there are changes, the person might awaken without significant parts of their life intact. In that case, the experience would be more like being born into a new body, only as an adult. The social consequences cannot be ignored either. The people they once knew would likely be gone. The world would have changed beyond recognition. Familiar landmarks, cultural, emotional, and moral, might vanish. Even if the soul returned, it would have to adapt to a reality that could feel more alien than death itself. Thus, reviving a cryonically preserved person, from the soul's perspective, is not simply a continuation of a previous life. It is the beginning of a new chapter, perhaps with entirely new tasks and challenges. For some souls, this path might be acceptable. For others, it may not be. Cryonics is one of the most mysterious and controversial ideas of our time. It stands at the crossroads of science, philosophy, and spiritual belief, and this is precisely why it provokes so much debate. From the scientific perspective, it offers a technological hope, the possibility of preserving the body until medicine can cure deadly diseases and repair damaged organs. But from the spiritual perspective, it raises a far deeper question. What happens to the soul when the body is placed into a frozen sleep? We have explored different possibilities. Some teachings say the soul departs immediately after death and never returns. Others allow for the possibility that it might remain nearby or exist in a special state of waiting. Esoteric interpretations add that freezing could create a unique pause between lifetimes, altering the soul's karmic journey. That is why there can be no single, definitive answer. For some, cryonics will be a way to extend their presence in the material world. For others, it will seem like interference in the natural cycle of life and death. And for some, it will be an experiment in which the soul itself decides whether to return to its body or continue onward. Ultimately, the question is always a personal one. It requires not only logical reasoning, but also an inner sense, faith, intuition, and one's understanding of life's meaning. We can debate the technology, we can present arguments, but the choice will always depend on how a person perceives themselves, as a body that can be frozen and restored, or as a soul for which the earthly journey is just one of many stops. Perhaps the most fitting metaphor is this: the soul is a traveler, and the body is only a temporary home. And sometimes, a home can be preserved so that one might return to it many years later, but the traveler is always free to remain or free to journey on toward new horizons, waiting beyond the next turn.